Today's guest has mastered the art of producing a podcast. He's produced podcasts with LeBron James, Steve Nash, JJ Redick, and all the NBA's biggest stars. His podcasts have racked up millions of views, and today, he pulled back the curtain. Today's guest is none other than Jason Gallagher.
Jason Gallagher, thank you so much for coming on today. Producer is a very vague term, right? Because we're technically podcast producers. A lot of what we're doing is probably not similar to what you're doing at all. So what are the actual responsibilities or day-to-day for you?
Yeah, that's a really great observation, honestly, because depending on where you work, depending on what the project is, that term is the loosest term in the history of any job. If you say I'm a producer, I still have no idea of what you actually do. For me, it means a lot of things. I'll say that at the beginning, being a podcast producer sort of meant you did everything from start to finish. You did, ideating on the whatever the topic of the show that given week. It meant you design all of the visual elements and assets. You design the set the way that y'all did. You did all of this stuff prior to the shoot actually happening. Then you record the shoot, you edit it, you put it out, and you're responsible for distributing it. That's what producer meant when I first hopped on the scene. Now, I think now that there's way more money in podcasting, I think that a lot of people have inserted themselves into the process. And with that, I think the specificity of what you do is much more it's just much more relevant today. So now what it means to be a producer for me is it's making sure the edit happens on time. It's making sure the creative happens, and whoever is assigned to the creative is doing that. It is really just like overseeing things in a really weird way. I'll say that right now I'm not technically I have no title that's actually producer. I think for Mind the Game, I'm technically the showrunner, which is a funny thing because I didn't think that was a thing in podcasting until about
That's
a
more
year
of a
ago.
Hollywood term. Right?
Yeah, it's a
What does that mean?
It's like a more high level,
yeah,
no?
well, showrunner is like it's like when it's big in like especially like prestige TV, where somebody will be a showrunner of like the show Breaking Bad, and you would have directors of each episode, but there's one sort of captain of the ship making sure it all is coherent and makes sense and follows the same story. That's a showrunner. And so what was funny was I was like I got the contract for Mind the Game, and it said showrunner, and I was like, that's not a thing in podcasting. And then I worked on it for like 2 weeks, and I was like, oh yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. I'm making sure that this huge machine that is publishing on literally all of Amazon's properties, on all audio properties, on YouTube, on everything, has this massive distribution arm, has all working with LeBron is working with its own entity in itself, and just making sure that goes steadily along. So that's kind of what I do on a show running basis. But, back when I was the purest sense of a producer, I'm going to reference this a lot in our conversation, but when I started The Old Man and the Three with Tommy Alter and JJ Redick, it was literally just the three of us for years. And it was like, a text would come through. Hey, we're going to interview so-and-so in this city. We need you to be there by this time. And then we'd all ideate on the ideas and the questions and stuff like that. I would pack my gear bag, and I would go and I would one-man band it. And it was most of the time in some sort of hotel room I've never seen before. So it was getting in, and it's doing a lot of what y'all did just now. It's like getting set up, frantically. For me, it was
Don't tell
solo
people that.
and, babysitting all these cameras and mics and stuff like that. So, so that to me was the truest sense of what it meant to be a podcast producer.
Do you think that's a better model? Having one person who just owns everything?
Yeah, I do. And people I work with now know that that's how I feel. And honestly, I'm probably, too busy to be taking on one project. I mean, I think that's kind of the problem for me taking on a singular project like that. But I do think it's the best way to work. it's very intimate that way. And I would say that in any creative process, the more cooks you enter into the kitchen, just the more muddied it all gets, and I think it loses a sense of identity. Again, I don't think that's just podcasting. I think that's creative. I think if you put the 10 most creative, smart people in a room, you're still going to have 10 differing opinions on how something should be. So for me, it's like when it stays that intimate, there's just like, I feel like it bleeds through the cracks a little bit to the audience. They can sense a real genuine perspective from the podcast. So yeah, I prefer that way of working.
I kind of want to go lean into the LeBron part about working with a celebrity,
Yeah.
icon, international, global icon. What's that like? Are there a lot of people on set? Are there unique challenges? Talk to me about it.
Definitely. So I'll just start by saying that when I found out I was going to work with LeBron, one of the very first things that I had to tell myself. So the way this podcast all sort of presented itself was that, you know, JJ Redick and our company, our little company, decided that we were going to partner with LeBron and his massive company to make this podcast together, right? We took on the production side, they took on the sales. And by we, I mean me. I had to do all the production on this, and it was wild. But one of the things that when JJ and I would talk on the phone about, okay, we're going to work with LeBron now, is that the easiest thing for us to do is just mail it in, honestly. It's just be like, we got LeBron James. We're going to ride this, we're going to coast this all the way to the bank. Easy peasy, right? I think we put more work, more thought into this show than anything we'd ever done because of the opportunity that it presented itself. It's LeBron James. You only get this. I mean, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I have to treat this with as much care as I possibly can. And so we actually started to think about the show pretending that LeBron wasn't involved. What's the best show we could make with a brilliant basketball mind? Let's pretend he's
All
not
the
there.
titles are in third person. LeBron James shares about this. LeBron James explains about that.
Yes. But for the sake of the creative of what is this podcast going to be, we had to think about this show. Could it stand on its own legs? Could it have its own brand identity without LeBron? Right. So Mind the Game in itself has sort of become its own brand, which I'm like very proud of that. Proud of the fact that when you hear that name, you know it's going to mean a little bit more educational with regards to basketball. And that was our promise to LeBron, was that we're going to make this about the basketball. We're fully going to try to, that's what we're going to try to do. And there were times on set where the guys would kind of talk, crap about somebody or whatever. And it probably would have made amazing headlines if we'd have published it. But we immediately, I would go back into a room and talk with some of his people and be like, honestly, let's just cut that. That's not what this show's about. This show's not about, talking crap or hot takes or anything like that. It is about the basketball. Let's just keep it to that. So that was kind of the mindset going into it. Then there came time for the first shoot. Okay. And I'll never, ever forget this. We walk into this big, massive studio, and there are so many people on set. I was like, what the heck? There was craft services. And I don't know if you all are aware of craft services, but craft services is what you have on a film set. It's what you have on a TV set. There are somebody designated to make sure that there is a massive table full of snacks, food, water, all the things. And I was like, it's an hour podcast, but whatever. So I looked at the, they sent a call sheet, which is just basically everybody. And there were like 50 names on it. I mean, there were so many people. Granted, They wanted to make it great. I don't blame them at all. But I remember JJ and I went into a room and LeBron was set to arrive in like 15 minutes. And we were like, this is a lot. And we were like, we're going to have to give each other, we're going to mess with each other on set. That's what we decided before LeBron arrived. We were like, we're going to make fun of each other. We're going to talk crap to each other. We want this to loosen up because everybody's tense. It was like the Pope was coming. You know what I mean? It was like, oh my gosh, LeBron's coming, you know? And so we were
Nobody
like,
has met LeBron before.
they had, but there was this sense of like, there was just a stiffness to it, to be
It's like
honest.
we can't mess this up.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of pressure. And, you know, up until that point, my viewpoint on podcasts is they're supposed to be intimate. They're supposed to be loose, you know? So anyway, so LeBron arrives, we all get on set, and I start telling JJ, like we're setting cameras, we're doing all this stuff, and I start telling JJ, I'm like, you do not screw this up for me. This is like my moment, and I'm here to shine. And like he starts being like, you're so conceited, like blah blah blah, and we just start giving each other crap. And you could tell LeBron loves it. He's just like, oh, we can
It
give the
didn't feel
director.
unprofessional.
No, he was like, oh, we can give our director shit. Oh, this is awesome. And I mean, and now LeBron and I have a good relationship where we just talk a lot of shit to each other. It's great. So, but that, I think that needing to just, you know, just loosen the set up a little bit. You know, I don't know what LeBron's other experiences are like, but I just want him to look forward to doing this podcast. You know what I mean? He's got a lot of obligations in his life, like a lot. He's a very disciplined person. He's up at 4:30 in the morning working out. He's got all these sponsors. He's got all these things. I want him to look forward to doing this podcast. You know what I mean? So that was
He's up
that was a
earlier than
huge.
Nash Hall.
What? Earlier than National Hall?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was kind of the experience there, and then from there, it's just sort of it's treating, you know, it's treating the gravity of the situation like with the respect that it deserves. This is a top two, you know, depending on who you ask, one of the two best NBA players of all time, one of the maybe 15 most popular human beings on the planet. And you have to treat that with a lot of care. And so I really, it's something that I'm very, like, I'm incredibly proud of the working relationship we've developed, the show. And as each episode happens, remember I told you that first episode, it was a huge crew. Each episode happens, it shrunk a little bit. We've chipped away at the amount of people that are in the room, the amount of people that need to be there. And what's helped is we've actually filmed a little bit on the road. And so there have been times where it's just me, the host, maybe a camera guy. You know, we do, you know, put some redundancies in place. I always, you know, that I wouldn't otherwise, but it's LeBron. It's his time is very valuable. You got to make sure that if he's sitting down for an hour, nothing screws up, you know? And so, but yeah, so it's been a really awesome experience, and he's great. He's just a dude. Being on this side of the LeBron machine is like sort of funny because I think everybody thinks he's like, you know, constantly, you know, uh, just he's this really pre-planned person, and he's like, you know, some people are like he's in the Illuminati and he's all this
He's the
stuff.
GOAT.
And I'm like, dude, no. Like, there was one episode where he commented on something. I can't remember what it was. He commented on something, and then the next morning on all the ESPN sports shows, they were like debating whether or not he had like actually meant this and blah blah blah. And I was like, I like sprung this on him in the moment. Like I know for a fact he did not mean anything by it. He was just speaking like a human. So that's been really funny to see. So
On the other side of that coin, because it's LeBron James and Steve Nash. They've been super dedicated people and probably still are for the past however many years. Do you think they approach podcasting differently than most people would? Do they have practices that they're using that just make them? How are they approaching it to make sure they're doing it the best they can?
yeah, so I'll say that both JJ Redick and Steve Nash, because those are the two people who co-hosted the show with LeBron, they both approached it like crazy. They prepped like crazy. We had multiple discussions, hours and hours and hours of meeting and notes and research and all this other stuff. What we're doing is we're treating this time with LeBron. He is very busy. He's also actively playing in the NBA. So he doesn't have all this time to be like doing all this stuff. So what we do is we try to make his life easy, and we use this as an opportunity to say, hey, we get to sit down with one of the greatest players of all time. Let's pick his brain a little bit. And that's always kind of been the approach. So with LeBron, less so, but we utilize this expertise in basketball. So like that's all we need from him. He just needs to show up, and he's like a basketball like computer. Like it's crazy. And then with Steve and JJ, it's what's been really cool about this, and I think your audience can appreciate, is that when JJ started hosting the podcast, he had been hosting podcasts for 4 years. He was calling the NBA Finals. He was on First Take with Stephen A. Smith. He was a well-seasoned media machine. So he was real good off the jump. There were no nerves. He made sure he was over-prepared. Like, he was great. Steve had never spoken really into a microphone. So it was actually developing him as a host, not just with the research on the basketball itself, but how to be a podcast host. He's a really introspective guy. How do you bring the best parts of that out of him? That's been really fun. That's like seeing his growth from his first episode to the end. The confidence in him like went like this. And that was really cool. And he worked his ass off on that. And it took some honest stuff. Like it took me having to give him feedback. But ultimately he wanted to be really good. And this is like a guy who is, one of the greatest point guards of all time. And he like legitimately wanted to be great. I mean, he would call me after shoots and be like, how was it? You can
It's a
always
new
tell
game.
me. Yeah, it's awesome. And it's a challenge. And I always respect people who go into it with that mindset. It's part of why I wanted to work with him. Genuinely, I mean, we talked to multiple people, but he had this drive and he had this different look on things. And I think it's like really informed who he is as a human being, but he had this drive to be really great and to have something to say in this, very crowded space.
Can you walk us through some of that work for someone who's looking to get better as a host, and for us? What were the questions that he was asking, or the sort of notes that you were giving him?
Sure. So it's hey, episode 1, let's make this very comfortable. Let's talk about a topic that is very easy for you to talk about, right? So that's kind of the first one, is sort of like let's make this easy on you by at least having the subject matter being something that is so well familiar with you that you don't even need to prep, but we're going to prep. So it's the information he had locked down, okay? And I think that that's first and foremost what's most important. And at that point, we hadn't done a screen test with him and LeBron. I mean, the first time they'd really spoken like that was in the room. So from there, that's when the notes on the performer, the entertainer, that's where those notes came in, where you say, hey, you're really nice. Like, you don't have to be so nice. Like, you can actually like push back. People love good banter. Mind the Game is an X's and O's basketball show. But, one clip that I sent Steve Nash that went super viral was there was a moment where LeBron was talking about seeing his highlights on Twitter. He was like, yeah, I scroll through my Twitter sometimes and see my highlights. And JJ cuts him off and he goes, LeBron, hold on. And he goes, stop. He was like, you can tell me if you look up your own highlights. And LeBron was like, I do not Google LeBron James highlights. And he was like, yes, you do. And he was like, we all do it. I've done it. You do it. We all do it. And then LeBron was like, you see him, he got called out. He never gets called out. This is LeBron friggin' James. And he starts laughing like really hard. And he's like, okay, sometimes I do. And it was really funny.
So funny.
And he was like, especially after a bad game, that's when you really need to look up your own highlights or whatever. So I showed Steve that to say, like, that's the kind of thing that I think gives the show some identity that's like, that you can't really point to. Like it's not a part of the log line of the show. It's not an X's and O's show where the hosts give each other crap. It's like actually just offers a sense of identity, a sense of like who you are. The audience gets to know you a little better through moments like that. So it's improving that. It's like, he was almost over prepared for that first episode. Then he started to loosen up and started to be like, oh, I can sort of speak about these things. I need to be prepared here, but I want this to be more of a conversation. So it was almost like we built this up to be ultra prepared, ultra researched, and then we started to chip away and find that equilibrium where it's like, how do you stay prepared, stay knowledgeable on the situation, have the right notes in front of you, but stay loose enough to have this very cool, casual conversation where you truly are yourself. And that's was the process over time that I felt like got to a really good place. And he's only going to get better. He's doing TV next year. Like it's going to be cool. So yeah.
Jason, when you're producing this podcast, how much are you prepping the guests? Like how much control do you have over the episode, which topics are going to be said? Is it more or less than a typical podcast you produce or like other podcasts that you do? Because it sounds
For Mind the
like they're
Game,
just going off the cuff.
for Mind the Game.
Yeah.
It sort of depends on the guest, to be honest. For Mind the Game, we've only had 2 guests. In our so one we prepared the guests, sort of manager a little bit. And then but that had more to do with the fact that we did an episode with Luka Doncic, and we wanted to talk about that episode, and the entirety of it was about youth sports. And so there's this language barrier. And so we wanted to just make sure he was very prepared for it. So we, shot him over stuff. Then our second guest was Kevin Durant, who I know, DJ,
So
you're not the
wild that
biggest-
those are the first 2 guests.
Yeah, I know that
Luka
I
and
know that
KD is
you're
crazy.
I know that you're not the biggest sports fan, but he will let it fly. Like
I know
we
these
did not
names.
send him anything to prep for. But one of the coolest things about that Kevin Durant episode, again, DJ, I might have to give you a little education here.
Yeah,
But
please.
Steve Nash was Kevin Durant's coach in Brooklyn, and that whole thing fell apart in not the prettiest way. It was a bit of an ugly breakup. They had not spoken since that happened. And then Kevin Durant agreed to come on the show. And I don't mind saying it, but like Steve was a little nervous. Like he had not spoken to me. He was like, what's the vibe going to be like? Blah, blah, blah. Man, that was one of the coolest experiences of my whole professional journey. And I know we live in a hyper critical world where people are like, oh, this was probably staged, whatever. That was a really authentic experience. Those 2 basically did a little therapy session on our podcast. They had not spoken since, or they had not spoken for years. And they really talked about, hey, what happened? What went wrong? Where were we, where did we come short? Like that was such a cool thing to see. And so that one, both of those episodes I prepared like crazy, but it was more like, preparing with Steve, like, hey, if it goes this way, this is where you could take it. If it goes this way, this is where you could take it. It was actually like, the cameras are going to be rolling. So all this is happening, and so, that was really cool.
Do you have concepts for each episode where you're going to say, we're talking about this today, or we're talking about this today? And how are you finding those concepts? Because at the beginning, it feels so random. And in our studio, at least, a lot of the people coming in, they feel like their job is to yap. They're like, oh, I can talk it's hard to talk, but I can work on myself and get myself to talk for an hour straight. And that's the job. How do you make it so it's just the topic is so strong that it's something that people want to hear, that I can talk about, and you don't have to think about, can I talk about this for an hour? Like, that's not part of it.
Yeah. So I'm fortunate enough to get to work with, well, this is the thing, man. Like golly, you're asking some really heavy questions. I just want you to know that the questions that I feel like I could talk about forever. I'll say this on the one hand. I think a really good producer probably thinks in their head they could be a podcast host, but they choose not to, right? So that's something for me that I've been very disciplined in, is that I'm like, I'm not the host. Even though there are times where I'm sitting there and I'm like, could I be a host? I just wind up saying, I'm not the host. I'm better suited to help really talented people succeed. So I say all that as a table setter to say, the host should be experts in their field, or they should have a unique perspective that makes people want to know what they have to say, right? And that could be through, hey, you're LeBron James, you're one of the best in the world, or it could be, DJ, you've worked, tirelessly over 3 years to build up an audience that they eventually care what you have to say, right? So that host level is that. For me, it helps as a producer to just be a fan of the thing that we're talking about. And that's something that I think is actually like really important. I kind of have the everyman point of view. I'm not an expert on basketball by any means. I'm probably no more than the average fan, but I consider myself a fan. I have a favorite team. I go to games, I cheer, I yell defense. Like I do all of that. I'm never going to allow myself to be so jaded in the field of basketball that I'm not doing that. I want to be a fan forever. And I think with that, I have the mindset of what fans want to hear. What is something that would be unique to the common fan? I think that the common fan is a very important stakeholder in this entire, sort of sports media machine. And sometimes shows forget about the common fan. And that's something that you want to remind people. So it's like, okay, I'm going to have LeBron James explain this high concept play breakdown or whatever. How do we make that make sense to the common fan? And I think that that is a really important thing. And for me, when it comes to topics and selecting topics, I think to myself, I haven't heard anyone talk about this, or I would love to hear LeBron James and his take on, Tyrese Halliburton and the Indiana Pacers or something, So that to me is, I think, really important. I think it really matters that you really care about the thing that you're talking about or making a show about.
It's hard because with basketball, you have all this data, you as a common fan, first of all, but also you know what people care about to some degree. With the smaller shows, I can say I think people are interested in, with a relationship show, for example, you could say people are interested in their relationship with their siblings. And that could be a good topic, but you don't really know. And you're kind of just guessing.
You know, like people love the Lakers and the Cavs and whatever
Right.
team's playing on Monday, like.
So is that something where you have to get past that place and force it to make so much sense, or kind of just, I'll talk about what I think is interesting?
Those topics are so different in the sense that like one of them is a reactive thing based on something that exists in the world. And then you could actually physically look up metrics and say, well, the Lakers are pretty popular. I'm going to talk about the Lakers, or, or movies. If you're a movie podcast and you are like, I'm going to talk about this indie film, or I'm going to talk about, Avengers Endgame or something, whatever. Like it's pretty clear. You have a roadmap.
Do people care about movies anymore?
What?
Do people care about movies anymore?
Less so, dude. That's a really great take. Like I talked about the muddy waters. It's sort of like, dude, movies are down. Like everything is down. We're living in an era where everything is down a little bit. And I think it's because there's so much content at our fingertips that, people are just kind of going into these fragmented areas. But back to DJ's question, yeah, I don't know. I've never really done a podcast that's like what you're talking about with regards to like relationships, right? Relationships, hell, I honestly, I would probably like, this is a really great exercise and challenge, but it's like, I would probably do a little bit of what I think is going to work. And then I would probably try to play the game a little bit and say, you know, um, eh, you know, find my way to make a little bit more noise, either by interviewing a really interesting guest or hell, even looking publicly into the public eye and saying like, all right, we're going to take 10 minutes and talk about this very public thing that happened that is relationship driven. And maybe I can get something out of that. And you know what I mean? Like it's
Talk about Coldplay.
I think one of the hardest things to do as a self-creator who doesn't have a famous host and is talking about a topic like relationships. I am naturally wired in a way that's like, I want to reach as many people as possible. So again, I would probably make the bulk of the episode about the thing that I think is important to talk about, but I would find ways through social media to either, it sounds like a little cheap, but like to either analyze like a public relationship or something, but just find ways to make sure that your social videos, all that other stuff has like this good reach, that's the way that I would do it. It's a weird thing. Like I'm naturally always going to think about what would the audience want to hear about. So it's like, okay, let's say I'm a relationship expert and you said I'm going to do an episode about a sibling relationship. I would probably give my expertise, but then I would like do like a fun 5-minute segment at the end that I'd create into a social clip that's like, I'm going to break down these sibling relationships from the movie Star Wars or something. Like, you know, like have fun and then just like make these things that have these entry points into discovering who I am as a content creator.
Yeah, and there's a part of starting out that everyone feels this burning need to not be reductionist, to create everything from scratch. I can't do anything for other people. And then, Aaron, we good? Yeah, so they have this burning need to not copy anyone else. Everything has to be totally original from scratch. And it comes at the cost of you're just not going to get any views if you're not making things for people. But you have to think like a producer. And
You have
it's
to stop
You always have to
leeching
meet-
off people's success. You have to stop being cheap.
yeah.
You have to, but you have to meet the audience where they're at too. I mean, that's the one thing that I just feel really strongly about across any medium is that, you know, like you said, existing in a vacuum and just trying to create this very pure thing and never even trying to get like it's kind of like, well, cool. I guess you can talk into a mic and put it out into the world and no one will hear it. But like, I really do feel like you have to respect an audience and meet them where they're at because everybody's time is valuable and everybody has a billion things that they got going on and a billion things that they're interested in. So what gives you the, you know, the right to sort of enter into my life? And I think that that's where you have to meet people halfway.
I love that reframe because it's the exact opposite. Everyone is, they think they're doing people a disservice by making something that they're going to like better. And it's the opposite. If you make something for them, that's where people will love you. They'll say, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for making this.
Yeah, we you know, I can only use my career as sort of as a, you know, whiteboard to share some of these examples, but you know, JJ Redick is a 15-year NBA player. He is now the coach of the Lakers. He was on Duke. He's a basketball expert, and he is almost too smart for the average basketball fan. And if it were up to him, he would analyze the Orlando Magic's defense. And I used to tell him, that's great. Nobody is going to watch that. Some people might, but not as many as. So we actually used to do a little bit of like, what we used to do is like basically like every other week I got to tell him, hey, you need to talk about this insanely popular thing that's happening in basketball. And as your reward, you can talk about the Orlando Magic defense too. So we used to kind of do these like little deals, but it's exactly what you're saying.
for me,
I
one
think
for you.
for him, it's like staying pure, but I love that he trusted his producer to say, hey, you know, and if you're a self-content creator, you have to be that. You have to be both the devil and the angel on the shoulders. You have to be the one telling you like the audience wants this. And then you have to say, but I really care about this and I need to get this out too. So you kind of have to find that balance.
The trust sounds super important. And I'm wondering, how do you build trust with your host that they'll let you say, talk about this, stop talking like that? Because sometimes they'll just be like, no, that's the whole idea of my show. I don't talk about that.
How do I build trust? I don't know. I guess success, one, people like when things are successful. So I've been fortunate enough to be a part of things that are successful. So that, you know, whatever. Now I'm kind of like, I have a solid reputation in the industry, so that helps. But I think that there has to be a sense of sincerity behind your voice. You know, I do kind of think that I don't know, but I think LeBron likes working with me because sometimes because I live in Oklahoma. I do think that sometimes he's like, oh, you're not out. You're never going to ask me for anything. Like, you know, I'm never going to be like, can I get tickets to a Lakers game? Or like, you know, I'm never going to do that to him. And I don't know. I think that there's a level of like, I'm doing this because I love it. I'm not really like trying to, you know, when I lived in LA, like a lot of people were in the industry because they want what comes with, you know, the notoriety. Like I said, it's going to parties. It's, you know,
You're not looking to mooch.
award shows. Yeah, I'm not interested in that at all. I'm interested in creating some fun stuff. I'm interested in creating escapism for people who need it, and that's always been my like North Star.
You're coming
I
from
was a
theater,
child.
theater to
Yeah, I was a
sports.
child. I was a child who needed escapism like badly, and it wasn't like heavy or deep or anything like that. It was just like I needed it, and I'm always gonna be like thinking about that kid who needed escapism, and so it's like that's where I've always had this like real deep level of respect for the audience that I'm trying to capture.
The reason we're here today is Aaron, who's part of our team, has been booking the best, coolest guest for us. And we were so pumped to have this, but he was even more, he's like, you have to have this guy. And we're going to give him 5 minutes for some questions with you, if that's all right.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's go, Aaron.
Has there been a favorite episode of LeBron and why?
Yeah. Yes, there was. There was an episode in season 1 where JJ I basically said there's, certain amount of seconds on the clock. You have to draw up a play for me and we're teammates. What do you do? And I thought that was like one of my favorite episodes because it was like they were both little kids again, honestly. And they were sitting around this whiteboard and they were just drawing up plays for each other. I love stuff like that, like the simplicity of something like that. When you talk about like, what does a common fan want to see LeBron be a human being and get excited about basketball is really fun. So I thought that was awesome.
All right. Another question. Are you a top 5 LeBron Glazer?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of my job to be, but that's that term. Hold on. Hold on, Aaron.
Yeah.
How do you define Glazer? How do you define Glazer? Let's hear it.
Somebody that just boasts somebody, like just boosts him, stuff like that.
I'd say as his director producer. I think it's my job to be. So yeah, sure.
If LeBron and SGA did a podcast together, what would you make them talk about?
So Shea is a very old school player. So it'd probably be about his mid-range game. Honestly, it would be about, we're in this 3-point revolution, but he plays for a team that plays pretty old school. They're getting to the paint. They're kind of physical. They shoot a lot of mid-range. Shea doesn't shoot that many threes. He's this player from another time kind of in this modern era. And I think that LeBron, he is somebody who, despite the fact that there's a 3-point revolution, that's been happening over the last 5 to 10 years, he is somebody who firmly believes that that's not the only way you need to play. So I think that I would have them talk about that.
How involved is LeBron in the production process?
Pretty involved. I mean, I would say on an episode to episode basis, there's now a level of trust, so he can kind of show up. We give him a little bit of a heads up, but I would say with regards to the show's creation and what it is and what the identity is, he was a huge part of that. So yeah.
Have you heard any of the LeBron songs?
The LeBron songs. No. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I am sometimes, but not as much anymore. It's not feeding me LeBron songs. I work in sports, so my algorithm, my interests are a little bit like I get like very zen. I mean, working with high profile people is very stressful. So a lot of my shit's like the zen stuff. So that's what's feeding me. So
Awesome.
well, thanks
that
for having
was
me
so
on, fellas.
cool.
Thank you so
Thank
much.